The new ending scene added to the Until Dawn remake has sparked a lot of speculations regarding a potential sequel. Additional rumors and leaks that I talked about in my recent video certainly support that idea as well. But in today's video, I want to ask a question that people have asked themselves regarding a lot of other games, and especially movies as well. Do we really need an Until Dawn sequel?
What the fuck is your problem?
Don't get me wrong, the idea of a sequel is extremely exciting, but I'm honestly very skeptical, but even more so very conflicted. Simply because of the fact that Until Dawn as a game, but more importantly as a story, wasn't made with the intention of a continuation. Because guess what? The story ended with Hannah dying. That was the big conclusion. The lore of the game started decades prior, but the story starts with Beth and Hannah falling into the mines, Hannah being reborn, and ends with Hannah dying in the lodge. That is the satisfying conclusion of the story and the game. What would the sequel be about? I've mentioned in my discussion at the end of the remake finale that I would love to see a deep dive into how the characters' lives would continue afterwards. What happens next? How does their life look like down the road? I just really grew towards the characters and I would love to see more of them. But also wouldn't mind if we don't. Again, Until Dawn as a standalone game and story is far from flawless, but in some ways still perfect. The story, the characters, the way everything connects and then concludes was simply perfect. I just wouldn't know what to expect from a sequel. Again, I would love an even deeper look into how these characters continue to live their lives after such traumatic experience, and the same scene gives a good glimpse at that, but in some way it was also amazing that this was left as an interpretation to us, the players. For all I know, I could imagine people being upset that their headcanon that they've had for these characters would not look like what the devs ultimately decide for them. A sequel would obviously be something I would love and cover and look forward to, but Until Dawn is just not a game and story that needs it. You just can't compare it to a franchise like Resident Evil, which does have recurring characters and a connective story, but it was a completely different type of world building and general story direction. Until Dawn is more like a standalone horror experience that was never written in the way for it to be expanded, like Hereditary or Midsommar. Two recent horror movies that became personal all-time favorites because they are so perfectly conclusive and leave nothing to be desired. Talking about movies, The Descent is another personal all-time favorite that was perfect the way it was, yet we ended up with a sequel that was basically pretty much the same as the original, just in less interesting and worse in quality. It's not bad by any means, but I don't know, unnecessary. I think you get what I'm trying to say. I absolutely have no issue with a sequel and would welcome it with open arms, but I also kind of don't need it. Simply because I believe the story is perfect the way it is and just doesn't need another chapter. Sometimes it's better to leave a character's future to the imagination of the player. And obviously, but most importantly, it would kind of completely go against the entire premise of Until Dawn. While Hannah's story always ends the same way, it is not for any of the other characters. Our choices alone decide whether they live, die, or experience a fate even worse than death. In order for there to be a sequel that continues the story and explores the future of the characters, there would have to be a decisive canon outcome to the original, which, like mentioned, goes completely against what made the game so special. Unless they would do some crazy shit where the game's story is impacted by the most recent end result of an Until Dawn file on your platform. Imagine how insane that would be. But not only is it probably impossible to code, you also couldn't release a game that literally needs the previous title to even function properly. But let's maybe drift away from the idea that the sequel would actually be an actual sequel. What I could expect Sony to be doing is not release a direct sequel to the Until Dawn story and its characters, but a spiritual successor. We already know that the Until Dawn movie isn't actually a direct adaptation of the game and its story, but instead new characters with a story we have yet to experience to judge. Why is the movie called Until Dawn then? Well, because it's a familiar name and an IP people love. Hayden herself even said she would have played Sam in an Until Dawn movie. Everyone loves Until Dawn. In regards to a new game, Until Dawn 2 would probably sell better than a new title. But to get back to my point, what I'm trying to say is that for me, Sony might be gearing up to launch their own Dark Pictures anthology. Remember, Until Dawn was created by Supermassive Games, under Sony. Everything that came afterwards was done by just Supermassive Games themselves. The anthology is its own thing solely by SGMG, while the Quarry was published by 2K, yet developed by Supermassive as a spiritual successor to Until Dawn, their own standalone title basically outside of the anthology. The remake had zero involvement from Supermassive, where this time Ballistic Moon worked on things instead. What if Sony wants to start their own franchise built off of the Until Dawn premise? You, the player, needs to keep the characters alive until dawn, which is technically the exact same premise in all Dark Pictures games and the Quarry as well. What if Sony, 10 years later, now makes their own franchise with said premise? And we aren't getting a sequel, but an entirely new story and new characters that see the same premise as Until Dawn. That is something that I could realistically see Sony do. The opportunity for games like that are genuinely endless. Then again, what is the point of the new Sam ending if it wasn't for a direct sequel to Until Dawn? Well, maybe it's just, like I mentioned, a special treat that gives a small glimpse into how the life of our characters would look like. Yet again, I can definitely also see it being a teaser and see them make a direct sequel to the Until Dawn story, even if it would make sense simply because, well, money. We've seen it done time and time again, especially when it comes to movies, and even more so the horror franchise. Like, why are there 3 other Jaws movies? The original was perfect and had a satisfying ending and didn't need a sequel, yet alone spawned an entire franchise. But you know, money. Why did Psycho, one of the best horror movies ever, get a sequel over 20 years after the original that left nothing to be desired? Money. Why did Quarry, over 20 years after its initial release, ever need a second movie that focuses on her little sister that basically just repeats the original? Money. Actually, well, that movie fucking sucked at the box office. You see, when you have cool and marketable characters like Michael, Freddy, Jason, Leatherface, Chucky, hell, throw in the Cenobites and even Leprechaun, then it's understandable why a studio would be releasing a shit ton of sequels. If you have something that works and has sheer endless possibilities, do it again. Saw was fucking perfect and had one of the best finishes to any movie beyond the horror genre ever. But you want to be complaining about the story being expanded and continued in a convoluted soap opera-like franchise that keeps its core identity with the traps and more. People just don't get tired of cool characters and ideas. I mean, at one point they do, especially when you have a great movie like H2O get followed by the piece of shit that is Resurrection, but down the line the interest, especially money, will return. And I focus a lot on movies here, but the same applies for video game franchises as well. Resident Evil, like mentioned. Beyond the horror genre, you got Pokemon, which keeps making shit tons of money every time a new game drops. Final Fantasy got fucking 16 main entries. If something is good and makes money, you can't blame studios to want to cash in. But again, all of this just doesn't really apply to Until Dawn as a standalone story, but certainly applies to its premise. Hence, Supermassive Games has released 6 games since Until Dawn that are basically Until Dawn with different characters and story. It just doesn't get boring. Again, it's all quite complicated, especially in insight to the fact that if we truly want to do a sequel to the Until Dawn story, a canon ending and outcome would have to be established, which would definitely rub some fans the wrong way. Ultimately, I can say no matter what happens, I'm excited. Whenever we get a sequel to the game, or if Sony takes its premise and makes their own Dark Pictures anthology-like franchise. At the end of the day, the fact that after over 10 years, Until Dawn is more hyped and talked about than ever is truly special. This game brought me so much joy over the years, and to see it go from fan favorites and highly acclaimed cult classic to a now further developed and possibly expanded franchise, including a movie adaptation, is just really damn cool. So what do you think? What do you think is going to happen? Are we actually getting a sequel, direct sequel to Until Dawn in its story and characters? Or are we just taking the premise and making an Until Dawn inspired game instead to basically Sony launching their own Dark Pictures anthology? Tell me all about it down below in the comments. Tell me all your thoughts as well. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Give me some feedback on the new audio and, you know, this type of script reading where I'm actually in front of the character instead of behind it and let the video play. I would really appreciate it. Other than that, have a wonderful remaining Sunday, a good start in the new week, and see you soon with more Supermassive Games, Until Dawn, and other content.